Okay, welcome back to lesson 4, and in this lesson we are looking at object-oriented programming in ABAP Cloud. In the previous lesson we have looked at the fundamentals of ABAP, programming in ABAP using Eclipse and the ADT. But in this class, to make this real, we'll be building a small project, a bank account class. So create accounts. We'll deposit money, we'll withdraw money, and then we'll transfer money from the account. And at the same time, while creating this project, we are going to be fulfilling the following objectives. We're going to be defining what is local class in ABAP Cloud. You're going to learn how to create instance of a class. You will also learn how to define and call methods. You will also apply encapsulation for data consistency. So this means that when we create an account or a balance, nobody should be able to mess with the account. And of course, we'll be using the tools Eclipse with ABAP development tools. And alongside, we're also going to be looking at class visibility, public section. You're going to know what this means, protected section, private section. And at the end of the day, you'll be a master in creating classes and implementing classes in ABAP Cloud. All right. Welcome to this channel. Of course, if you're new to this channel, please kindly hit the subscribe button to encourage me to make more videos, more quality videos, and also to reach a wider audience. Analysis shows that 85% of the people who view this channel are not yet subscribed. So please hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share to someone. Thank you. Alright, so now let's proceed. Let's start the coding. Let's create our global class. So I'm going to open Eclipse now. Open the Eclipse IDE, and then we are going to create a new ABAP class, and we give it a name. Created this workspace in the lesson 1. So if you don't know how to create this workspace, you can look at lesson 1. So what I need to do when you just open your Eclipse, since this is a cloud project, we need to always click on or press on F5. Press on F5 to refresh and reload the resource. So I'll use this workspace. So it requires that I connect to the business technology platform or to the cloud. So open logon page in browser, click on this, and then with my details, so you have successfully logged on. You can close this page now and continue using the ABAP ADT. So let's close this. So in previous video, we have also covered how to create packages. So you can also check how to create package in the previous lessons. And now inside our package, we are going to create this class, this bank account class. So I go to classes, then right click on classes. You see right here, new ABAP class. So click on new ABAP class. So when you right click, it automatically placed it inside the package that I have already created. So let's give the name of the class. Remember the naming convention that it must start with the letter Z or Y. So this is the name, lesson 4, bank account, and let's give it a description. So our description will be working with global and local classes through bank account creation, bank account class creation. Okay, that's more than the characters that is needed. I can just say through bank accounts class. Still more. So let's reduce it. Let's just say working with classes through bank account class. So now what I'm going to do is that we are going to add an interface. So we're going to add this interface. This is what we have been using. So the purpose of this interface is that it gives the main method, or let me put it this way, it provides us a main method that will enable our program to run in the console. Okay, so our class will run like a program. So let's add this interface. And then we can select next. So since it's a local object we are creating, so there's not going to be a transport request, but in reality, in real life, there's always need to create a transport request for any project you create. So create a new request. We cannot do this right now because this is a local object we are creating, object repository. So click on finish. Now we get these snippets of the class. So we are going to look at what all this means and how to work with it. Okay, and now this is our global class that we just created. So this is accessible everywhere in the system. If you look down here, you're going to see global class, and then you're going to see local types. So when you click on local types, we will be able to define the local classes. Okay, so local classes can only be accessed inside the same class. while global classes is accessed everywhere in the system. So now we are going to create a local type, a local class. You click on local types, and then you will need to enter the keyword class. So let's start it with LCL, which is like local class. Then you can press Ctrl space. So this is suggestions. So that means we want to create a local class to give us the code snippet. So when it comes, you can double click on this. Now we have the snippet created, the local class definition, and the local class implementation. So definition is where you define your attributes, your methods that you will be using in this class, while the implementation is putting those methods and actions, methods and attributes into operation. Okay, so but first we are going to remove this create private. It's not going to be a private class because we are going to use this local class in our global class. All right, we're going to call it in our global class. So let's say local class bank account, right? So now you have public section, protected section, private section. So this is what we call visibility. All right, so in a layman definition, public section means that anything you define in this public section is available to other classes. Private section, anything defined here is not accessible to other classes. And protected section, we also look at this. So these are visibility concepts. All right, so in our public section, we can have methods, we can have attributes. So of course we can also define types. So types will create or types are good for clean signatures. All right, and then so first of all, let's define the attributes that we're going to be using in this class, or the types that we're going to be using in this class. So remember, you can define types with keyword types, and let's say ty underscore amount. So this is the amount. For instance, if the user wants to deposit an amount, this is the variable that we're going to be using, and it's going to be having a type of decimal float. So that means it can take floating point numbers. And then the second type is going to be our currency, ty underscore currency. So the type, of course, is character, like string, and the length, we give it a length of 3. All right. Okay, so this is an error, not decimal, so it's decimal float. This is not valid because I wrote class twice, so remove that. And if you have a red, when you have a red line, it means there's an error somewhere. Now, in the public section, after you define the types, okay, then another thing you need to create are the methods. All right. So the methods, these are, you can see them as actions that needs to be carried out with this class. Don't worry if you don't yet understand, just follow me. We'll tie it together at the end and it will be more clear at the end. So methods are actions. So one of the methods that we need to create, or functions, will be called the constructor. It will create a valid object right away. That's a constructor. All right. So now inside this constructor, there are 2 things we need to know, or 3 things: importing, exporting, and returning. So what it means for importing is that what will this method receive? What is it taking? Okay, what are the attributes or values that it will take in importing? So what is coming into the constructor methods? That's importing. So you write the keyword importing, and then you write those variables that you want to create as import parameters. And if you are creating an import parameters conventionally, you can just start with iv as importing variable. So now for the constructor, so when we create this bank account class, local bank account class, we want the owner name to be automatically, or to create a valid object for an owner right away. So who is the owner of this bank account? So we can say owner, right? Owner, and then we give it a type of string. So it's like, what is your name? The name of the person. You can just say iv underscore owner and iv underscore name. So we don't use comma to separate this. And then we go further to create another variable, which is currency. So what is the currency for this class that we are going to this bank account that we're going to create? So you can say ty underscore currency. Remember that we created types here. All right, so that means I was explaining this in previous video. For reusability, we create types. So ty underscore currency, and then we give a default value. So use the word default to give a default value, and then this is euros. Another important variable that we need to create, IV underscore initial deposit underscore initial depot. So this is the initial deposit for the account that we are going to create. So for instance, you want to create a bank account, you need your constructor to initialize these objects right away, the owner of the account, the currency, and the initial deposit, before you can even make transfer, withdraw, or whatever methods that you want to implement. So type will be of ty underscore amount. So for reusability, we created types amount. Then we're going to give a default value to be 0. So you can right click, or rather shift F1 to format your text. Okay, so this is what our constructor method will be taken in, or yeah. So these are the importing parameters, we'll put it that way. All right. So now we are going to define more public methods. So this is more like the behavior of the class. Like I said initially, layman terms, methods, actions that you want the class to perform. Okay. So if you want to define a method, what is the keyword? Use methods. So I can decide to put a semicolon in front to have nested methods to create many methods. So if it's just one method, you don't need semicolon. You can just say method and then do what you want to do. So I will say methods is a behavior. So these are still public methods that can be accessible in the global classes. Alright, so now the first method that we want to create, what is the first action we want our account, local accounts to perform? Of course, every account should be able to, you have to deposit money inside, right? So we give the name deposit, methods deposit. And so if you are depositing, what is the parameter that you want this method to take in, to receive, and then process later? So that's what we call importing parameter. So our deposit method will be importing. So what's the name of our importing parameter? To be importing the amount. So IV, importing parameter underscore amount, and the type will be of what? ty underscore amount. We want to deposit amount, deposit money. You take in what? A value, and then this IV amount is what we are going to be processing later, right? So if you deposit money, you are not going to return anything. So that's why this method will not have an exporting parameter. So I will explain exporting parameter very soon, and then we'll also explain returning parameter. Okay, so now what's the next method, the next public method, the next function that we want this class to perform? And the next one will be to withdraw. So our bank class should be able to withdraw, money from this class. And so what is the importing parameter? Importing parameter also will still be amount. So if you want to withdraw, you have to state the amount you want to withdraw. So that's the functionality of this class. It takes in an amount. So we're going to say, I'll just copy this. So IV amount type ty underscore amount. So as well, if you just have only one importing parameter, you can put it on the same line like this, since it's just one. But if you have multiples, then you have to separate it, right? You can put it this way on the same line. As well, you can just do shift F1 will automatically format your text for you. So, but then when we want to withdraw our money, we need a returning value, and we need to return a success message. So was the withdrawal successful? So when you put in the money and then you click on withdraw, was it successful? So we need to return a reply. Okay, so that's where returning value comes in, the keyword returning value. So returning value. So we're going to use inline declaration here. So that will be called RV underscore success. And then the type will be ABAP bool. So this is like the Boolean operations. So either true or false. All right. So this line here, returning value RV success, type ABAP bool. It can also be written this way: returning value RV success. And the essence of this is that this line declares that the method will provide a result that is called RV success. Okay, this is a variable, and this result will just be a simple boolean value because it's type ABAP bool, which is ABAP true or ABAP false, indicating the outcome of the method's execution. So when you withdraw money, we check what is the value of RV success. Okay, so the next thing we need to do now is to create another method. So if this is just one, this is just one, so we can just keep it on the same line. All right, so let's create the transfer to method, transfer to method. So we want the user to be able to transfer from this account. And what are the important parameters? So if you want to transfer from an account, what should this method carry? So the method should have a target. So there should be someone you are transferring to, right? So there should be a target, and also you have to enter the amount. So these are inputs. So these are what? Importing parameters. So we need to define importing parameters. And so you can say IO, which is importing parameter underscore target. And then we give it a type. So this is going to be in reference to our local class. So that'll be type reference to local bank account. The reason is because our target is going to be another bank account class that have been created, or another bank account object that have been created. So that's why the type is that. And then we're going to have importing parameter or importing variable, which we already defined, amount, which is type ty underscore amount. And for our transfer to method, we are going to also define a returning value. So a returning value after make transfer will also be what? RV success. So we want to know if the transaction was successful, and the type will be the ABAP bool, which is ABAP true or ABAP underscore false. All right. So we check if the transfer, or we store the value of the transfer of the transaction in the RV success. Now, I will just go ahead, and you have already understood the concept of creating methods. So I'll just go ahead and paste the other methods. So the next method we are going to create is the get balance. So for get balance, we do not need an importing parameter. So we only want to return a value. We only want to return to get the balance that we have in the bank account, right? So for that, this method get balance will have only returning value, and then that value will be stored inside RV balance. Okay, inside this variable RV balance, and then we have the type ty amount. Okay, remember we define types, that's why we are able to reuse ty amount everywhere we need to use amount. I covered this in one of the lessons. Of course, if you are new to this video, I forgot to ask, please don't forget to subscribe to this video, to this channel, hit the like button, leave a comment if you are enjoying this series. Okay, so now the next method we need to create is, if you want to know the owner of the account, all right, we want to know the name, the owner of the account, the get owner method. So when you are getting something, you only return the value. So you don't need to add an importing parameter. So we use returning value, stores it in RV owner, and the type will be string. So the next method we are going to implement is the get currency method. So we want to get the currency for our bank account. So the method is get currency, and then returning value. The result of that will be saved inside RV currency, which will be type of ty currency. Okay, so now the next method we are going to create is also the get account method. So the get account method, or get account ID method rather. So returning value, use the keyword returning, and what I'm returning, we're returning value, and that value is saved inside RV underscore ID, and the type will be integer. So this is integer I. All right, now we are done with the public methods. So now what we need to do is to define the private method. So if you go here, so the private section is going to be the section that are private. So this is what's called encapsulation. All right, so those are the methods, the methods that are only accessible within this class but not outside this class. So that's what we define inside the private methods and attribute. Protected section, So for protected section, so anything defined inside protected section will be accessible by other classes that inherit from this class, more like a subclass or derived classes. So if there is no connection between this class and that class, you cannot access the protected section. So the private section, nobody at all can access it except when you are inside this particular class. For the public section, it's accessible everywhere inside the class and also outside the class. All right. So we are not going to do anything with the protected section. So we comment it out, and so we're going to go on with the private section to define methods that we are going to use in the private section. So this is where encapsulation comes into the game. So private section is the encapsulated state. There will be no direct external access to whatever we are going to define in this section. All right. So let's define the attributes for this class. So if you know data definition, use the keyword data, put a semicolon, put a column in front if we have several data that we want to define. And so I'm going to define the attributes here to be my owner, my currency, my balance, and my ID. So this means that this can only be set my owner, so someone else will not just come and say, hey, I need to access my owner and then change my owner or change the currency. So that will not be possible. That's why we keep this attribute inside this section. And also here we're going to create a class data. So this class data means that we can access it using the class without creating an instance object. So don't worry, you'll see the difference shortly. So this class data, we are going to give a variable gv_next id, then type will be integer. All right. So now we are going to create methods also inside the private section, and this is basically more like helpers and validators to help us maintain consistencies. So the methods here in the private section will be helpers for validation and consistency. So the first, of course, the keyword to use to create methods is called methods, put a column. And in these methods, what we want to create first, the first method or function we want to create first. No, the first method, they're actually different between method and functions. So it's a function when it has a returning value. All right. So our first method here is validate_amount. And to validate the amount, we need to have what's importing parameter. So you need to put the amount that you want to validate. So we say our importing parameter will be iv_amount, which is type ty_amount. Then when we validate the amount, we need to get a returning value. We need to get a response. So that will be using the keyword returning, and to return a value, the value will be saved inside rv_ok. Inside this is a variable, and it will also be a type of bool. So ABAP_bool, so which is like ABAP_true or ABAP_false. And the next method we are going to create is, does this account have sufficient funds? So has sufficient_funds. So if you want to check if it has sufficient funds, then it has to have an importing parameter. So you have to put in a value, and of course, like we have done so far, the importing value will be the amount, and the type will be ty_amount. And of course, you can just do Shift F1 to format our text. All right. And we can also, for this, also have a returning value. That also be, let me just copy and paste from here. Returning value that also be saved in RV. All right. So at the end of our methods, you can put a full stop here, and this is the end. You can say end class. All right. So this is the end of the class definition. So you can see end class. Let me do Shift F1 to format the text. Okay. So now the next thing we need to do is now the class implementation. Actually, if you remove this, there's a shortcut for this. If you don't have this, you have a red line here, and it says class LCL bank account definition does not have a class LCL bank account implementation. So So if you need quick help or quick fix, you can just click on Control 1. So put your mouse over where there's a red line and then just do Control +1, and then it gives you a quick fix. Say add ABAP doc, rename local bank accounts. So right here you can see create implementation for ABAP class LCL bank account. So you can just click and you can see that it creates the implementation part for class LCL bank account, methods, bodies for all obligatory methods to be added as well. So you can see that we created constructor method, we created deposit, we created get account ID, get balance, get currency, get owner has sufficient funds, transfer to validate amounts, and withdraw, right? So yeah, let's just, if you click on this, you hit on enter button, so automatically it gives you the code snippets for the implementation part. So like I told you, the implementation is more like activating the methods that we created. So this is just definition of the action we want the class to perform. So methods, just see it as an action. Then for the implementation is how these actions are going to be carried out. Implementation, you implement what you have already defined in the definition class. All right, so now remember we have the method constructor, we have a method called deposit. So to implement, you just say method, get the method name, end method, and so. So our quick fix helped us to generate the code snippets that we needed, right? So let's start with the constructor method. And what is it that we want the constructor to do? So look at the constructor. First, it's going to take in these values. Owner, string, which is a name, like maybe a name. It's going to take in currency. Then you're going to take in initial deposit. So if you give me these values, name, let's say Victor, currency, euros, initial deposit, 20,000 euros. What am I going to do with it? So the first thing we need to do, like we said, the constructor is what? It creates a valid object right away. So the first thing we need our constructor to do is that it should generate a unique ID. So generate a unique ID. Remember that we created this variable right here, which is a class data. So it can be accessed without creating an object, okay, or an instance rather. So that is the variable we are going to use and store the unique ID that we are going to be creating. So the unique IDs. So the global variable underscore next ID is equal to global variable underscore next ID plus 1. So this will make sure that the IDs are created incrementally. So no two accounts will have the same ID. Then remember that when we create this ID, we need to store it inside my ID. And because my ID is a private variable, it cannot be accessed outside of this class. So we need to pass in a value into my ID. And that value will be global variable underscore next underscore ID. Oh, okay. It's not my ID, it's my variable underscore ID. Okay, yeah, MV. So you see it's highlighted red. So here it's not Y, but MV ID. Okay. So inside the constructor, the next thing we're going to do is that we are going to set the base fields. All right. So the base fields are what? The variable for owner, the currency, and of course the balance. So these are the private fields: MV underscore owner, MV underscore currency, not MY, MV underscore balance, because this is 0 for now. So MV owner, remember this is a private attribute, so we can access it by creating an object for this class. So the only way to access it is only inside this class. And so that means when we receive in the constructor importing parameters owner, currency, initial value, we want to now set the values for these private attributes using what we received. So this is the point now. Now you cannot just directly send in your values to my MV owner. Okay, you cannot just send in the currency to MV currency. So what we need to do is I will first receive it from the constructor, and then in our implementation we'll then set these private variables. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that means IV underscore owner and then it's equal to IV underscore currency. That's importing parameter. So these are the base fields. And then we also set the initial deposit, which is only through the method. And this is consistent rules. So we are now setting initial deposit. All right, so how do we do this? We write an if statement. So if initial deposit is greater than 0, deposit initial deposit. So this is majorly for checks. So if the user sends in initial deposit, for instance, so if it was not a private attribute, then everyone can just set their initial deposit by just accessing the class. So if initial deposit is greater than 0, deposit that initial deposit. That's what we are checking here right now. All right. And that is the end of our constructor method. So let me control save. If I zoom out a little, you can see the whole constructor method. So when we use the constructor method, we generated an ID and then pass this ID into the private variable or a private attribute, my ID, and then we set the base fields, my own call this my owner or the owner of the accounts, the currency, and the balance. Then we check the initial deposit. And so if initial deposit is greater than 0, we deposit initial deposit. I hope you are still following. Still a long way to go. Perhaps I should break this video into 2. Alright, so that's the end of the constructor method. So the next method we need to implement is the deposit method. So here we check if the amount is valid. So we say if, remember there is a method called what? Valid amount, that takes in the amount value. So now that will help us to check the amount. So if valid amount, what's taking in the importing parameter, you should always keep a space when you are entering values in this method. So if valid amount, there should be a space between the first parenthesis and your variable. So if valid amount, you pass in the importing parameter amount. So this is what we want to check. If valid amount IV is equal to ABAP false, then do nothing, we just return. So we return from the methods. And if the moment the valid amount is ABAP false, so if the amount passed into our deposit method is equals to ABAP false, then what we're going to do, we are going to do nothing and then leave the method. Or rather, okay, I noticed I was explaining stuff and I did not hit the record button. Okay, so method deposits, let me just explain it one more time. All right, so let's zoom in. So for our method deposit, we are going to first check if the amount you're going to be depositing is valid. And if you click on Ctrl space bar, it gives you the importing parameters and returning value for this method. So this method is a public method that we created. If you click on F3, all right, so we check if the amount is false, is equal to ABAP false, then we leave the method. So if this is not false, if it's true, then we set the balance, which is a private attribute, which set local balance by saying MV balance plus the importing parameter balance. So for instance, you want to deposit money, the money will come in as the importing parameter. It will check that amount to validate it. And then I believe I've also explained this, the method for get account ID, then the method for get balance, method for get currency, method for get owner. So what I'm not sure I explained before was method transfer to, before my connection went off. So first, for the transfer to method, we need to first initialize this variable RV success. If you click on shift space, you see the definition of the transfer to method. It has importing parameter IO target, which has a type reference to another local bank account class, and then IV amount, which is a type of LCL bank account TY amount. All right, I also have a returning RV success value. So we just initialize the RV success from the beginning to be false. We want to start the transfer. And then the first thing we need to check is that we need to check the target. Basic checks the target account if it's initial. So if the place or the account we want to transfer to doesn't exist, then we leave the method. So return, that's the keyword, leave this method, so the transfer will not be carried out. However, if it's true, then the next thing we need to do is to validate the amount that we want to transfer using the validate amount method. Okay, so that validate amount, if you click on shift and space bar, you see that it takes in the importing parameter as amount, and then also have a returning value. So if we validate that amount and it's false, we leave. If not, we continue with the method transfer. Another final check that we can do is to ensure same currency. So you want to transfer, you want to make sure that the currency of the target account is the same thing as the currency of the source account. So how do you do it? You write an if condition. So if the target, so inside target, we use the get currency method to get the currency of the target account, and then we use the greater than and less than sign to compare with the local, with the source currency. And then if it doesn't match, you leave, you return, you leave the method. And if this checks out to be true, then finally we draw from the sender, then deposit to the target. So first also we need to check if withdraw amount ABAP is equal to true. So because the withdraw amount, if you click on F3, we go to the implementation of the withdraw amount. We had to perform some checks. We have to first see if there are sufficient funds. Then we perform the subtraction of the amount that was imputed into the withdraw method from the current balance. Okay, so if this returns to be true, then we can continue with the transfer. So if withdraw IV amount is equal to about true, then IO target, which is our target account, is going to call on its own deposit function method, and then pass in the amount that we are going to deposit, and afterwards we set RV success to be true. And this deposit function, if you click on F3, go to the implementation, you can see here that we did some checks, and then we did the mathematical calculation of how to implement the deposit. All right, so that's what I did. All right, so the validate amount method, this one we have not yet implemented it. So yeah, we are only calling it here, but we have not yet implemented it. All right, so validate amount. So let's implement the validate amount. Okay, so to implement, we can also say method validate underscore amount, then write end method. All right, so if you look at the definition, you can just click on F3. We take in importing IV and return a value. So for our implementation, just this, you can see returning value RV OK. So for the implementation, we are going to first set the RV underscore OK equals to ABAP true. So we initialize the returning value to be true. All right. So now the first validation is that no negatives or zero. So we want to ensure that when we want to enter amount, we want to deposit money, or we want to withdraw money, you should not put minus something, or you should not put zero. So that means we're going to check if the importing parameter, so which is the amount now, if IV underscore amount is less than or equal to 0, then what do we need to do here? We need to say RV underscore OK is equal to ABAP false. So the returning value what will be false. Okay, and that means our method will return RVOK to be ABAP false. All right, we can also check this during testing and check debugging to check the values. So end if, put end if there, and that's so there should be space. There should be space here, so that's why there's error here. All right, so that's the end of the validate method, and that was why when we used validate method here, you see that we are checking if the response or the return value is above false. So if validates underscore amount, I'm passing the amount. It checks the amount here. Is it less than 0? If it's less than 0, then it returns a false, and if this place is false, our deposit will not take place. I hope the flow makes sense. Just take your time and listen to it again, and it will make full sense. All right, just have the flow of execution in your head. All right, so less than or equal to means no negative source 0. So immediately the thing is true, then other methods that implement validate amount will run accurately. Okay, all right, so we are done with the local class. I think it's a lot of time, but so let's go to problems. So let's quickly tidy up some errors that we're having. Okay, so here it's supposed to be a period here, and let me do Shift F1 to format. All right, my MV balance is unknown, so here there's a typo here. I can just put balance. Then this one, implementation missing method from has sufficient fonts. Okay, so I have not yet implemented this has sufficient fonts, but I've used it. So let's do, so if you click on Control 1, it gives you options to fix the error, add implementation for has sufficient methods, make sufficient method protected. So we're going to make it add implementation for sufficient methods. Double click. So the method has sufficient fonts. So let's implement that method. So if you hover on this and you click on Control and spacebar, you see what values we have. We have importing values amount, and we have returning value RV. Okay, so if we want to check for if the amount is sufficient, whether I want to do a transfer or a deposit, then let's first set the returning value okay to be equal to ABAP true. All right, so we first set it to be true, and then we check, because the sufficient font is actually checked if you want to make a transfer. So we don't need to check if you have sufficient funds to make a deposit, right? Okay, so we check if MV underscore balance is less than what we want to withdraw, which is the IV underscore amount. So if this guy is less than what you want to withdraw, then we have to set the returning value RVOK to be above false. Okay, of course we need to end if. Just do shift F1 to format for the period here, Control save. Okay, and let me give you an example of where it has been called. So inside our withdraw method, we check if has sufficient fonts is equal to above false. So which means if this our method checks the font and is false, then we are not going to perform a withdrawal. We're going to leave the withdraw method. All right. So basically that's all for the local class that we created. Now the rest of the program is going to be in the global class. So click on the global class tab to go to the global class. In the global class, likewise, we have the public section, we have protector section, we have private section. We have already explained that we use an interface for this our class. So this interface has a main method that will help our program to run on the console or in our console. Yeah, of course, first you need a reference variable. We're going to use an inline declaration, so you can say data. So let's say LO underscore Victor. Okay, so this is the object you are creating, equal to, use the keyword new, and then you call on the name of the class. So we are creating an instance of the local class we just created. So that'll be LCL underscore bank account. All right, so put open and close brackets, put a period at the end. So I'm going to teach you the new syntax method of passing the values. So here you just click on enter, and if you highlight here, it says no value was passed to the mandatory parameter IV owner. So when you are creating an instance of a class, the importing parameter is always mandatory. So it's possible to create an instance without any values, but the importing parameter is mandatory. Surprisingly, we did not use any exporting parameter in this example, but as time goes on, we'll have a look at that. So let's pass in the values. If you do control and space and hover here, you will even see the values for the constructor. We have IV owner, IV currency, and IV initial deposit. All right, so what you need to do is pass in your values. So IV owner, we want to pass value into the IV owner. And so who's the owner of this account? The owner of this account is Victor. No full stop, no comma. Go to the next parameter, which is currency. All right, so let's see, IV underscore currency will be equals to euros, EUR. This should be single quote. All right. Oh, it already has a default value of euros, so we might just not need to pass in the value here. Okay, then let's set the IV underscore initial depot, so to be equals to, let's say, 20,000 euros. All right, so this is the instance of the class we just created. So we are creating a new class. So this is the owner of the class, the owner of the account, Victor, and then the initial deposit. So likewise, you can create two accounts. You can just copy this, create two accounts so that we can also try the transfer stuff. But let's change the name. Let's change the name LO to Daniel. New local bank account. So the owner is Daniel. Initial deposit also to be 20,000 euros. All right, so we can save this, control save. So first test, let's just print out the amount that has been created. So if you want to print out the amount, of course, you know that we can use the out class. We use the write method to write in our console. So out hyphen r greater than sign, then the write, and then put a period here, passing some text that you want displayed on the screen. So let's see, created accounts. So we want to print the accounts that we just created account. This is writing on the wrong side. This should also be in the class run interface method, so right here. And then I'll bring back my console so that we can see the output. And so we need to print the name of the account, and also to get the account ID, and also get the account currency. So I'll just paste the text here. So use outright and L0 Victor. So this is the object that we created. I think I should zoom out. Okay. So L0 Victor is the object that we created right here. And if you see hyphen greater than sign get owner. So this is object component selector or instance component selector. So we use this hyphen and then greater than sign when we want to get a method, an instance method. But if it's just a class method or class attribute, we use equal to and greater than sign. So for instance, class data attributes or class data methods. All right, the instance as a return, we get the owner. So get owner, let me still zoom in. So this will return the owner, the name, and then we concatenate with ID to give us the ID of this instance. So we say the instance name again, get account ID, and then anytime I want to get anything from this class, Victor get balance, Victor get currency, and so and so. All right, so let's do the same for Daniel. You just copy the same code and just change the objects or the instances rather. So let's see, outright. So for the instance, Daniel, get me the owner. So it will print out the name, Daniel, and then get account ID. So let's change this to Daniel. So it will return us the account ID for Daniel, which is incrementally generated like we showed in the local class. Then this right here also change the instance to Daniel, and this right here also change the instance to Daniel to get the currency for Daniel. And so let's save this, save all, control save all, and then we can do, in ABAP there are 3 fundamental laws. You save, you check, and then you activate. So right here you can do Ctrl F2, so contains no error, so let's activate. Ctrl F3 to activate. Now it says here that bank account has been activated. Now let's execute. You click on run as, and then ABAP application, click on OK. So if you check the console, you see Victor, the ID is 1, and the deposit, current deposit is 2,000 euros. All right, so this second account, Daniel, ID 2 and 2,000 euros. So of course, if you want to debug, you can, I've done a video on debugging, so also look at the video. I don't want this video to get longer than it should be. So you can just go to your local classes, local types, put the breakpoint on an executable line of code. So let's put a breakpoint here. You can just say right click, double click on the line, and then a breakpoint is added right here. Then if you click on, let's save, and if we click on execute again, ABAP application, anyway the debug is not triggered for some point. Okay, so the other things you need to do is just to print out other stuff to test our code, right? So we've tested that we can access the get owner, the get account ID, the get currency, right? Then what we need to do next, we need to see if we can deposit money. So the second thing is that we have to call the method deposit, called method deposit. And if you want to do that, you will just need to, maybe I should type this out, call the instance that we created, L0 Victor. So I want to call on the deposit method, so just do the instance component selector, hyphen, and then greater than sign. And you see that you even have auto suggestions. So you can see deposits, you can say get account ID, you can see get balance, you can see get currency. So we want to do deposit, so you click on deposit, double click. So if you call on a method, you need to follow the parentheses with a period at the end. And remember that this deposit method, no value was passed, it must take in a value, which is, it must take in important value, it must take in the amount I want to deposit. So let's say I want to deposit 10,000 euros to Victor account, and afterwards we can print out the account again. Okay, let's print out the account again to see if our deposit works. So outright, after deposit of 10,000 euros, Victor balance will be what? Equal to, this is concatenation, curly brackets, you concatenate string with variables using curly brackets, and before then, these are called expressions. Before then, you need to put everything inside the bar or pipe symbol. Okay, so you see that everything is in one pipe symbol, everything. Then you can concatenate between text and variable. You put them inside curly brackets. Your texts, your literal, you put them as text as they are. So we now have LO underscore Victor get balance. This is our method get balance, parentheses, close it, and also we get L0 Victor get currency. So we should expect that our balance for Victor will move from 20,000 to 30,000. So let's save this, control save, and then let's activate, or we can let's check problems. Let's do F2 check. Okay, no errors found, so we can activate. Okay, so let's execute now. Run as ABAP application console. Okay. So you can now see below here, after deposit 10,000 euros, Victor balance 30,000 euros. So it works. Now we can move to the next test. So we want to test the withdraw method with success flag. All right, we want to test if our withdraw method works. So we are going to call on the withdraw method. So we say if low, that's the instance we created for Victor, is selector. So we want to withdraw, select withdraw, double click, and then put a period at the end. So we need to pass in a value. Let's say it wants to withdraw 1,000 euros. So if withdraw 1,000 euros equal to ABAP true, then what are we going to, we're going to print out, and then we can say withdrawal okay. So the withdraw method will check if you are able to withdraw, and then let's print out the balance after withdrawal. So let's say out L0 pipe symbol withdrawal is amount after withdrawal, curly brackets, L0 underscore Victor, get balance, then put this here, period right here, then this pipe should be at the end right here, should be space, there should be space between the pipe and the parentheses, else, because if the withdrawal was not successful, then we need to write an else statement, out withdrawal of 1,000 failed, insufficient funds or invalid amounts. Then afterwards we need to end if, put a period. We can as well shift F1 to format. So let's do control save, check, and as well add euros here. So let's activate. So ABAP application console. So you can see withdrawal okay, amount after withdrawal 29,000 euros. So our withdrawal method works fine. So we need to test, the next thing we need to test is the transfer money. So we want to transfer money from Victor to Daniel. So by using the transfer to method, transfer money, let's put this in Victor to Daniel. All right. So of course we can first check if our objects, the instance for Victor, call on the transfer to method. So remember that it takes in the target import parameter, which is IO underscore target. So our target now will be what? First, let me show you. Let's hover on transfer to, click on shift and space. So transfer to what? It takes what? Importing parameter IO target, which is of LC bank account, which is an instance of a bank account, of a local bank account class. So now that IO target, we are setting it now to be the instance that we created for LO Daniel. Okay, so IO target is Daniel, and this must not be initial. So how much do we want to transfer? Let me show you again. So space. We also need to put amount that I want to transfer. So it takes in target and amount. So the amount, IV amount equals, let's say 9,000 euros. Okay. So, we apply some checks on the background. So if this Daniel and amount equals to ABAP true, so it first check, okay, IO target is not initial, which we defined in the class. Then the amount, the sufficient amount. So it checks. So if everything checks out to be ABAP true, then we can proceed to carry out whatever I want to carry. So we're going to print out that, oh, the transfer was successful. Transfer of 9,000 euros was successful. Okay. So if it was not ABAP true and it was false, so else maybe something happened, the amount was not sufficient, or there is no instance for the class. So we're going to print out that the transfer failed. Transfer 9,000 euros failed. And then if you need to add an end if with a period, and there we go. So let's add some output text to print out the balance for Daniel and also for Victor. So I'll just paste it right here. So we print out Victor, call on the instance, and then call on the method get balance and euros. For Daniel, we call on the instance LO Daniel, get balance, and also in euros. So we should see transfer of 9,000 was successful, and then we'll see the balance for Daniel and Victor. So let's do a syntax check. Save first. We can Control S. Check for syntax errors, activate, and then we execute ABAP application console. Okay, I set a breakpoint right here for debugging. So when you set a breakpoint on a line and you execute, then you can see the flow of execution. You can see the variables here. I've explained extensively in the previous lesson 3 about this debugging and how you can check. So you can even see now that my owner is Victor, euros, and balance is 29,000. ID is 1, next ID is 2. So you can do step-by-step execution and then see how the code flows. So I'm going to remove this breakpoint. Click on F8. So here is where you can change to debug perspective and also to ABAP perspective right here at the top right. So let's go back to the ABAP perspective. So on the console, you can see transfer 9,000 euros, maybe transfer of 9,000 euros was successful. So my balance now, remember the balance before now, amount after withdrawal was 29,000. So after the transfer of 9,000 euros, Victor now has 9,000 euros. Daniel had initial balance of 20,000 euros. So plus that 9,000 euros, now have 29,000 euros. So that's that with the bank app. We're able to withdraw, we're able to deposit, and we're able to transfer. Okay, so now you can see how encapsulation works. So we made the MV balance private, and so the only way to change it is through when you want to deposit, or when to withdraw, or you want to transfer to. So you cannot just use the instance of a class that you created to change the balance of the account. Okay, so in a bank account, the balance must always be valid. So you don't want random code in the program setting the balance to negative or skipping the rules. That's why we made MV balance private. And so the only way to change it is through deposit, through withdrawal, and through transfer to. So that's encapsulation at work for you there. The object will protect its own data and enforces consistency. So for example, if balance was public, then someone could just set balance to -9999 and then the system will break. But with private data, that is impossible to do. All right, so basically in this lesson you have learned how to define local classes, class definition, structures, attributes, methods, and signatures, and also you have learned how to create instances. All right, and you have also learned how to do method calls, and you have known what is encapsulation using hands-on experience. So now if they ask you what is private method, public method, you should be able to know what it's about. So thank you so much for watching to the end, and if you like this video, please leave a comment, hit the like button so that this video can reach to a wider audience, and it will also encourage me to continue on this series, and also subscribe. Thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next video.